I think that CardFight Vanguard is a really interesting franchise with a lot to talk about. Let's start at the beginning and talk about the anime adaptation, a story arc at a time. The thing that immediately makes CardFight Vanguard stand out is its pacing. It's a slice of life anime with some fantasy elements thrown in later on, unlike Yu-Gi-Oh! For example, which is a full-on shonen fantasy with slice of life elements here and there. The first episode is about how protagonist Aichi Sendo gets introduced to the card game. Aichi got given a card as a child which made him interested in the game.
Here, check it out. I want you to have this.
He eventually built his own deck, but was always too shy to actually play the game. A school bully finds out he has a rare card and steals it to boost his chance of beating Kai, a really powerful player. Aichi finds out the bully lost the card to Kai, and Aichi challenges Kai to his first ever card fight to earn his own card back again.
Why don't you fight me for it? Huh?
Kai takes things slow with Aichi and teaches him how to play as they go along. This, in turn, teaches the audience the basics so they can understand and follow along with the card game. This is a clever move since Vanguard is so heavily focused on the card game. Aichi wins the card fight and his blaster blade back because Kai had underestimated a first time player and was going easy on him. From this point onwards, it really does become a slice of life that focuses on Aichi meeting new friends and slowly improving at the card game. One thing that I really like about Vanguard is that it tried to recreate the feeling of being a teenager that's into a card game. Any time outside of tournaments is usually set in a local card shop where Aichi finds new opponents to practice against and discuss different mechanics of the game. Aichi being so new to the game is a good way of making sure the audience can learn as he does. I love this side of Vanguard. It's an interesting way of separating itself from certain similar anime. The focus on the card game itself means that Vanguard becomes a refreshingly focused anime that doesn't end up getting muddled, as well as making sure that the fanbase of the anime and the fanbase of the card game are one and the same. Even this early on, this side of the anime is fresh and full of lots of depth. Let's talk about the card game itself for a little bit. I haven't personally had the chance to play it myself, but I think I've played enough card games and watched enough of the anime to know what I'm talking about here. CardFight Vanguard has a lot of style and depth to it. It has a lot of interesting ideas in it, like the ability to draw triggers from your deck whilst attacking or being attacked, as well as being well paced. Every turn counts, and it's possible to turn around a game with luck and skill, but it doesn't go as over the top as Yu-Gi-Oh! With crazy combinations. It's a pretty balanced game with lots of viable archetype variety for how new it is, and the card designs themselves are stylish, especially later on as the artists start to get into the swing of things. It's a very different game to Yu-Gi-Oh! And it has its own unique feel to it. The strength of the card game means that the anime is much stronger because of that. I can't really see this setup or cast of characters working if this anime were based on Hearthstone or Future Card Buddy Fight. As he gets better, Aichi decides to take part in tournaments, but Vanguard even manages to add a small twist to that as well. In order to enter tournaments, players need to form a team of 3 card fighters. The rounds are a best of 3 with each team needing to research their opponents and decide what order they're going to fight in. This adds another good layer of strategy to the tournaments and adds themes of leadership, teamwork and decision making to the anime. However, the pacing is a little slower than I would have liked. None of these characters are fleshed out or particularly developed yet, and it feels like the first 30 episodes or so could have been cut down to around 20 episodes instead. It's not too bad, but it's noticeable enough that I recommend you watch certain parts of Vanguard in the background whilst you're doing something else like drawing, building a Lego set, or even organising your trading cards or refining your deck. One thing that adds to my recommendation for watching in the background is the quality of the English dub.
After careful consideration, he's the bad one.
I get that a lot of people generally prefer subs, but the English dub of CardFight Vanguard is one of my favourites. It doesn't use any really well-known voice actors, so the characters' voices sounding familiar shouldn't distract most people, as well as the voice direction being pretty solid. This also isn't similar to 4Kids dubs where they change and censor a lot of things. The biggest change is that the English dub uses the same opening themes with English lyrics instead of Japanese ones. It's not until the halfway point of Season 1, around about 30 episodes in, that Vanguard introduces a couple of elements I really dislike. The first is that Aichi's team lures. On paper, this actually sounds really good. It makes his journey more believable and shows that people will always have to lose. It also shows how his team reacts to losing a major tournament, and seeing them get over it helps the characters progress further. However, the problem is that the team needs to do well enough in a tournament to rank up to the next one. When Aichi's team lose, They get set back to the very beginning again and spend around 30 episodes going through the motions and seeing them regain their progress by going through the same tournaments against the same opponents again. If the first 30 episodes felt a little too slow, then this feels like a straight up waste of time. It doesn't feel quite as bad if you watch this part in the background like I've suggested, but I can't help but feel like this could have been executed much better. I feel like the anime itself is aware of this because it's around about this point that the fantasy element starts to come into play and the villain of the arc is introduced, which is the second thing that I'm not really a fan of. It's not well executed, and Ren's motivation as a villain is really flimsy, especially considering that he redeems himself after his car fight with Aichi at the end of this arc. It just kind of feels like this was lazily thrown in, and whilst it isn't god awful, it isn't particularly well written or interesting, especially considering how many episodes it gets. This end stretch of season 1 was predictable and repetitive. It's by far the low point of the entire franchise for me so far, but at the very least it's still watchable. The Asia Cerca Ark is the second major CardFight Vanguard story arc, and it's where things get more interesting. Aichi's team has now won the national tournaments and defeated Ren. They are now ready to enter the upcoming international tournaments, and the setup is extremely well executed in my opinion. This arc begins with a new character named Takuto asking to be taught how to play the card game. Aichi agrees to teach him with a practice card fight. Every story arc begins with a retread of the tutorial, but it's always done to introduce a new character or is blended into the plot. It's refreshing to get the basics reminded to me every once in a while, just in case I decide to take a break between seasons and forget anything important. Takuto wins the card fight, and his actions lead Aichi to believe he was lying about being new to the game and had ulterior motives to wanting to go against him. He checks his deck to see that Takuto took it and replaced it with his own. After that, Aichi finds out that Takuto was the one that organised the upcoming international tournament, so the best way of getting close to him and finding out what happened to his old deck is to win that tournament. I, as an audience, wanted to see him get his old deck back because it was tied to his backstory in the first arc, and also because slowly over time we saw him take care of his deck so much and update it by actually opening packs and coming up with strategies. His deck change makes things fresh and new since he's using new cards that he has to learn to use effectively. The setup to this arc manages to get better than that. Episode 2 and 3 are just Aichi recruiting his old team back and getting them to agree to enter the next tournament, but the 4th episode of this arc ended up being one of my favourites in the entire franchise. The team visit a rival card shop only to see that the shop is temporarily being closed down because they're travelling to Singapore for the tournament too. This is when Recca from the rival shop playfully teases and asks why they're even entering the tournament at all. Aichi already has his established motivations, but his teammates seem to not really have motivations or focus. They're only doing it out of obligation or to sightsee.
You won't succeed if your mind's not on the game.
Recca tells them that they may as well give up right now of that mindset and challenges Misaki to a card fight. One of the clever things here is that Recca didn't challenge Aichi, which meant that both her and Misaki had an equal chance of winning, since obviously the main character would have won this fight if he was in it. Since CardFight Vanguard is a slice of life anime, it should be focusing on small, low stake fights so that the audience won't automatically know who's going to win. This raises my investment because it makes me want to know who wins and how they earn that win. Ironically, keeping stakes low ends up raising the stakes. I sided with Recca because I could see some truth to her points. I thought the main characters needed some more motivation and development. And Recca wins using a limit break, a new effect type that the characters don't use yet. She tells them that the metagame is always evolving and the only way of returning to their former glory and winning the upcoming tournament is to learn how to use this new effect type and updating their decks.
You guys were the best in the country, but now I'm not so sure.
Aichi only just got a new deck, so he already has the ability to use limit breaks, but he still needs to learn how to master it. Now the main team have more motivation and specific focus. There's just something about the tone and character interactions of this episode that I love. This episode has so much more personality to it than any other previous episodes. From this point on, the arc is focused on the tournament. This arc is considerably shorter than the first one, which is already a step up because it helps fix the slow pacing, although the characters still aren't as interesting as they quite could be, yet. After finishing the first story arc, I took a year-long break from this anime because it was too slow paced and I didn't like the last half very much. I'm so happy I decided to pick it back up again because CardFight Vanguard is an anime that keeps improving. I found that the Asia Cerca arc was much more enjoyable than the first arc because of its strong setup, shorter length, and better character interactions. It feels like the writers are getting better as the anime progresses. Speaking of getting better as it goes on, nowhere is this improvement more noticeable than the Link Joker arc. This arc is where the characters get some much needed development and interesting interactions. Where the Age of Cerca arc left off, Aichi had won the international tournament, which means he's now officially the #1 card fighter in the world. Aichi and his friends had finished middle school, but unfortunately he was too smart for his own good and got accepted into a high school that seemingly none of his friends got into. Aichi's new teacher asks him what his hobby is in front of the class. Aichi tells the class about how good he is at CardFight Vanguard, which is a direct contrast to how shy he acts in front of his class in the very first episode.
Well, I guess Well, my hobby is, card fighting, sir.
It shows just how much he's changed over the course of the first 2 arcs. However, this scene does a 180 when the class react. They don't even know what Vanguard is and see card games as a waste of time. Aichi doesn't know how to react to this and is reduced to being shy again. This is where Aichi truly became an interesting character to me. I find the combination of him being both shy and timid, but also really powerful and revered by other card fighters, a really interesting twist that I don't think I've seen in any other anime. One of Aichi's new classmates does actually get interested in his talk of card games and follows him up to the card shop after school, and this is where we get our usual tutorial fight. Once again, it's done as a way of introducing us to a new major character, and from this point forward, Aichi is more of a mentor character towards this classmate Naoki, rather than being a straight up protagonist. This is a smart move since Aichi is now the best card fighter, so he's obviously not going to lose very often anymore. It made each fight that Aichi took part in really exciting and something that I was looking forward to. In fact, a lot of the major characters from previous arcs take a step back to allow room for these new characters to shine and take up the stage. Honestly, I like this new main cast more than the previous one because the banter and back and forths had a lot more personality to them and each character got more development. It's not just the characters that are a refreshing change. This arc isn't centered around entering tournaments. Instead, Aichi and Naoki are trying to form a school club based around Vanguard. An interesting thing that happens is that the school council tries to stop Aichi from forming the club because the school is so heavily focused on studying and getting good grades. They think that having a hobby like that will waste precious studying time. I really like this message. The Link Joker arc really pushes the idea that having hobbies is really important and beneficial. Being into Vanguard is helping Aichi come out of his shell more and get better at socializing, as well as giving him excuses to travel and meet new people. Maybe that's a little too corny of a message, especially considering this anime is a card game advertisement, but I always have a really soft spot for such upbeat and optimistic messages. This arc was really well paced, especially compared to previous arcs. Its structure is similar to the first arc, they both have a similar amount of episodes, they both focused on a character getting into the card game, and they both introduced fantasy elements around the halfway mark. This time, however, the fantasy element is far more interesting and well executed. The Link Joker is a force that can possess someone right after they lose a card fight, and they want to possess everyone. Sure, there is no real motivation, but I like that the Link Joker is shown as more of a virus than an outright villain. It creates an interesting back and forth because if someone who's possessed wins, their opponent gets possessed too, but of course, if the possessed loses, then the Link Joker becomes undone. A little while ago I mentioned how not knowing who's going to win is a good way of potentially raising stakes, and Link Joker's reversible nature means that the character you're not expecting to win sometimes does. By this point, Vanguard has amassed a pretty sizable cast of characters, and the Link Joker arc takes advantage of that by focusing on nearly all of them individually in the second half. This takes a lot of time away from Aichi to build up to when he eventually does come back into focus and finally confronts the Link Joker himself. This built up a lot of suspense and excitement for me. The Link Joker arc is extremely strong overall, and I thought that more than made up for getting through the slow paced parts of the first arc. This arc really serves a purpose and finally fleshes out all the characters. Legion Mate is the fourth and final story arc of Vanguard, and it's definitely one that stands out for a few reasons. This arc is the only one to not have an English dub. This made it difficult for me to get through it. I think that the English dub of Vanguard is better than the Japanese version, and I had really gotten used to these characters having specific voices, which made this a weird watch for me. I don't think it's a problem many people will have, but I felt this is definitely worth mentioning, and I really do hope that Bushiroad end up going back and giving this arc a dub if they get the chance. This is the only of the 4 arcs to be entirely shown in fantasy rather than a slice of life. It introduces new villains right at the beginning, and the entire arc is focused entirely around Kai and the others fighting them, and yes, there is a protagonist change in this arc. Aichi gets a role shift, and the original rival Kai is the new main character for this end stretch. This arc is pretty well put together and is kept short and quickly paced. Each opponent does get given a backstory along with their motivations explained. However, this arc didn't really leave much of an impression on me other than the initial shock of this protagonist change. Due to it being a tightly written shonen rather than a slice of life, it completely leaves out almost every supporting character, which I missed because utilizing a large cast was one of Link Joker's strengths. Not to mention that this is the final arc, so it would have been really nice to see the other characters play a role in the story one last time. It's still a really solid arc and I'm really happy they ended it here. They could have pretty easily went for one more arc, but Legion Mate is a much different twist and I appreciate them ending it here. Overall, CardFight Vanguard manages to be one of my favourite anime despite the flaws that I've pointed out. It does have a slow start, but I thought it was worth getting through because it more than made up for it later and I'm glad the franchise is still alive and well to this day.